All right, welcome back for another episode of the Fleet Success Show. I'm your host, Josh Turley, joined by my co-host, Tony Yankovich. How are you?
Doing great, Josh. Thanks.
Awesome. Hey, so here in the shop today, this week we're doing Spirit Week. That's the fun threads. Tony representing KC over here. Right. That's right. Two-time Super Bowl champs.
Right. 3 out of the last 4 years.
Yeah, going for a three-peat this year, I think. Right. So, but you just got back from NAFA last week. I know we just published an episode about that shortly ago. And I wanted to kind of get from the show floor, right, from your eyes and ears. I wasn't able to go this year. Mark and I are going to talk about the EntreLeadership Summit that we were at just down the road in Dallas. But would love to hear, your perspective, how the show went, kind of like a recap for our listeners who couldn't attend.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, NAFA was in San Antonio this year, and it coincided with Fiesta Week.
Oh,
so
fun.
Fiesta was an incredible time. The convention center is right there in the heart of downtown San Antonio. So the Riverwalk was right there, and we got to experience the Riverwalk and a lot of good things that San Antonio has to offer. So it was a great location, a great venue. I talked to a few of the NAFA folks, and they said they had record turnouts this year.
Cool.
So the most attendees that they've had in the last several years.
Like 2,100 people.
Yeah, over 2,000. They were very excited about that. So it was a great turnout. The venue was nice. I actually did a presentation and an educational session on Monday afternoon about replacing vehicles in the middle of the supply chain issues. So we had probably 125 people or so attended my session that afternoon.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great turnout. So that was exciting. I'll go over some of the things that we talked about in that session in a minute. But then we also had a booth down on the exhibit floor, and the exhibit floor was full. They had a ton of vendors and exhibitors and equipment. So there's a lot of stuff to do and see. We showed off our brand new booth.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. It was awesome. We had so many compliments on the new booth setup. It was just exciting, and very proud to be an RTA employee when people were just enamored with our booth.
Yeah, I really like that new booth setup. Like, I haven't seen it in person yet. I've seen videos. I'm really excited about it. Next week. We're going to Government Fleet Expo, seeing it in person for the first time. And I heard it was awesome. I heard a lot of good feedback on it. So
it was great. And we had so many people just come up. People came up and take pictures of it. Yeah, like, oh my gosh, we've never seen anything like this. This is fantastic.
What does that do for you as an employee when you're there and you see like your company is on a booth like that versus, our normal setup is just a simple 10 by 10 pop-up frame?
Well, it makes you so proud. I mean, it makes you feel like you're truly part of something special. And our booth is special. The people that were working the booth, we had 7 RTA folks there from various teams, and it was great. We had great people at a great booth. We had a great turnout. So many people came and visited us.
Yeah.
Current clients, past clients, people that were looking to maybe get some consulting work, people that were thinking about changing fleet management information system stopped by. The way the booth was set up, we had an opportunity to actually give live demos.
Yeah,
in the booth, we had some other demo loops going on at the same time. The other nice thing that we did is we actually did some mini educational sessions.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Facundo and I, we actually sat up there and had a couple of like 10 or 15 minute educational sessions where we talked on different things. And the first one that we talked on was probably the top 6 KPIs that fleet managers should be looking at and tracking and reporting on. And so that was exciting. We had real good communication back and forth between the people that were there and us.
Yeah.
And so that ended up, running over about 10 minutes or so, just because we were so engaged with them and they kept asking questions. It was fantastic. And then when we weren't actually actively doing those presentations, those mini presentations, we had so many people come up and just take pictures of the slides that were up on the TV.
Oh, so yeah. Well, cool. What were some of the, as you're there on the show floor, what are you kind of hearing? What's the word on the street about, either attendees? What were they saying about the event? What were they saying about fleet in general? Just anything you were hearing out there on the floor?
Well, I think the first thing that we heard a lot about is, so many people came up, hey, this is our first conference back after COVID.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people are now having the opportunity to get back out and hit the conference, the trade show circuit again. So that was really exciting. So many people were saying, hey, this is my first conference since pre-COVID.
Wow.
So that was exciting.
5 years.
Yeah,
Crazy.
it's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. And I talked to a few of the NAFA board members that came by, and they were so excited with the turnout. They're already looking forward to next year. They're already putting stuff together. I think it's in Long Beach or something like that next year. I can't.
It sounded familiar. I'm trying to remember.
I should have looked that up. But they're already looking forward to that. I mean, They had such a great turnout, and they want to build on that. The people that were there for Fleet, they're really looking at technology innovations. They're looking at things that, resources are still tight, and generally that is either with the actual assets, the vehicles and the equipment, or with people. So they're looking to look at technology to help them, augment that shortage of people in their offices.
Yeah, it's not a budget shortage. It's literally an availability, right?
Right.
Availability of people or availability of parts/vehicles, right?
Exactly. And great segue into my session. So generally, what we talk about in fleet replacement plan is we identify the economic theory of vehicle replacement. We talk about optimal replacement cycles and how to calculate those and when should you be replacing those assets. But what the slant that I put on the session this year was more on, let's identify what those supply chain issues are. Why are we having this difficulty in replacing vehicles? And we talked a little bit about, that every OEM has their order cycle and production cycle. And typically in the past, those are pretty standard and they're pretty fixed and they hit those targets. But over the last couple of years, I mean, OEMs are flat out canceling orders. I did one of those show of hands at one point during the session. I said, how many people have had their orders delayed? And, a lot of hands. Okay, now keep your hands up. How many orders were delayed by more than 6 months? Most of the hands stayed up. How many orders delayed more than a year? And you'd be surprised how many people have had orders delayed that long. And then the next question was, okay, how many have had orders canceled completely?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I mean, about half the people that initially raised their hands kept their hands up. So people are flat out getting their orders canceled and they're not being able to replace vehicles.
Yeah.
And so we started
talking. All they do then is they just keep rolling forward the order. Absolutely. And it's just they're stuck in this endless loop.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what some of the people were talking to me about afterwards. It's like, this is a vicious cycle. How are we ever going to get out of it?
Yeah.
And I think one of the important things is to learn, why are we in this position? And so we talked a lot about the supply chain issues.
Yeah.
We talked about the impact that COVID had on just the stay-at-home orders and the production plant shutting down, and not only the OEM shutting down, but like the semiconductor chip production was shut down completely. And then the interesting thing was the shift from the demand on semiconductors from automobile industry to actually to home electronics and consumer products. So everyone's working from home while the kids are going to school from home. Now there's a huge need for cell phones and tablets and laptops,
webcams and microphones and cameras. It's crazy. Yeah,
absolutely. And it was crazy because and again, these are just some round numbers, but a standard vehicle today at the minimum requires about 200 semiconductor chips. Yeah. And then if you have a little more, luxury car and it has a little more bells and whistles, you have infotainment, you have a navigation system, we can get up to about 1,000 semiconductor chips that are required for the production of a vehicle, which is a ton. And then you look at electric vehicles, they're requiring somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 semiconductor chips in a vehicle.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
And so now we've got this little perfect world, right? We've got this increased in EV demand and an increase that puts an increased, supply chain load on the demand for semiconductors because it requires, 4 to 5 times as much as just a standard vehicle. It's interesting though, is that fleet vehicles are the ones getting canceled when they typically order the ones with the fewest bells and whistles, right?
Exactly.
And that should be the one, you figure that's your most reliable repeat buyer, a consumer, and isn't necessarily going to have that same type of brand loyalty. But you walk around any dealership lot and where's the focus? It's on consumer driven, the vehicles, right? Consumer grade vehicles anyways. But it's been interesting to see that shift a little bit. And I think too, what happened, everybody started working from home. Everybody started saving money. The economy just got flush with cash, right? If you remember through the PPP loans and the the EBITDA loans and all that stuff, the ERTC loans, it was nuts. There was just so much money in the economy that no wonder everybody just had, spare cash to you. Either we're buying houses or buying cars, right? Or you're buying this brand new TV or something, right? It just put an absolute crush on the supply chain. It wasn't ready for the demand.
It did.
It's funny though, it's like we still haven't recovered from that.
No, and part of the reason is because that shift in consumer demand for the semiconductor chips.
Yeah.
And the other thing that has happened now is, so the OEMs and a lot of, companies that produce things, they were really in step with just-in-time ordering.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they did not want those shipments of semiconductor or components or parts to arrive until they were going to go and be assembled on that vehicle coming down the assembly line today. And the OEMs have done a great job of doing that. Then the supply chain issues hit, the semiconductor shortage hit. And so now what they've done is, because they don't want to, so at one point, the Wentzville, Missouri GM plant had 30,000 Silverados sitting in the lot, what they called build shy. Yeah. So they built them everything they could do until they couldn't build anymore. So they were just parked. So they would do that. And now what they want to do, because they couldn't get the semiconductor chips to complete the build, now what they're doing is they're actually stockpiling. So OEMs and all these other production companies, now they're stockpiling semiconductor chips. And that,
this is a masterclass in supply chain management.
Oh my gosh.
So I went to school, this has been 12, 13 years ago, right? But in my supply chain class, we literally talked about the effects of just-in-time inventory and how awesome it is when it's efficient. But then when there's a shortage and an event, right, a black swan event, that all of a sudden you get this bullwhip effect, right? And you guys know how a bullwhip works is, it trails behind the leading hand, and then it snaps and it goes way further, way faster, and it gets out of control. And that's what we're seeing, is that people have a bullwhip tendency to, I've got a shortage. What's my natural tendency? Stock up and stock down.
That's right.
We saw it with the toilet paper shortage, right? But now this is just happening at a corporate scale for GM, which is like, this is way bigger than hoarding toilet paper. This is, now we're stockpiling semiconductor chips. What's crazy about that is that those end up going obsolete. And now you just got a surplus of chips that can't be used.
Right.
And you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we leverage these, right? And make sure that we're still using them so we're not totally losing our shorts on this investment. Because all they do, that's a gamble, is really what you're doing.
Exactly. And one of the other things we talked about is how we truly are a global economy nowadays.
Yep.
And what happens in other parts of the world really does impact what we're doing. And so we talked about some of the political issues and some of the wars and conflicts that are going on.
Yeah, like the trades between us and China right now is just, it's a mess.
Absolutely.
It's a diplomatic mess. And so.
Exactly. And then, we talked a little bit about natural disasters. And I mean, literally a month ago, there was the 7.4 magnitude earthquake in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah.
And how does that impact the automotive industry? Well, 60% of all semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan, and 90% of all the advanced semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan.
Oh, man.
And the leading semiconductor chip producer in the world is in Taiwan. They lost
TMSC, right?
Yes, exactly.
Taiwan Semiconductor Company.
Yes, they lost 30% capacity of production immediately following the earthquake. So, one of the things that I kept stressing to people is we are not going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
This is going to be the new normal where you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to be flexible. And I feel bad for some of the government clients because they are so strict when it comes to procurement and budgeting and can we encumber the funds? And you have to be able to be flexible. We're working with a university client right now, and thank goodness that they have some flexibility. And so when their dealer that they've been working with most recently, they had a few extra vehicles come in, and the guy's like, he called up the university and said, listen, I know you aren't looking to buy any of these right now, but I've got 5 of them that just showed up. I'll give you first crack at them.
Yeah.
And they went to the dean of finance and said, listen, here's the deal. And the dean of finance signed off on it, said, go get them. You have to have that flexibility nowadays.
What'll end up happening then as a side effect, right? We'll be talking about this in a year or two, is because of that, like now you have a very non-standardized fleet.
Right.
So you're going to end up with more parts inventory just to cover more, and so it's just downstream effects of this. We're going to be studying this for years. Forget the political, sociological aspects of the pandemic. The supply chain is going to be a case study taught for generations.
Oh,
right. Like just how this all trickled and how it really is a global economy now.
It really is. And it, the new normal is going to be, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
The fleet manager is going to have to wear another hat, and that logistics expert hat. And it's really a struggle to be a fleet professional nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is I have a theory is that if you do extend out your optimal replacement life cycle, as long as those maintenance costs are still cheaper than year one of buying the vehicle, you're still doing okay. Right. So, if you do have to extend out a year or two, maybe even 3, you're going to be creeping up your probability of a chaotic repair, right? Or I don't know what the word is, but a critical repair goes up. But in between then, you still have some window. Just don't let it turn into 10 years, 15 years. Because I've seen some of those vehicles in our system, right? The 20-year, Ford vans that are still running around. We still got Crown Vics in the system.
Right.
By the way, that's our most popular vehicle that people track today. It was still running strong. Good old Crown Vics. I heard from somebody else that was on the show floor. It seemed like EVs were all the talk of the trade show circuit. Like the most of the sessions all circled back to EV. And the general census was like, enough of EV already, right? Like, keep this out, please.
Exactly. I mean, there were a ton of EV vehicles. In fact, the Tesla had one of their pickup trucks on the exhibit.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Which was kind of cool.
It is cool looking.
That was neat. We had, right across from our booth, there was another electric vehicle, Canoe, I think is what
those look cool though.
Those are really cool looking. So that kind of stuff is really exciting. But on the educational sessions, again, I didn't count them up, but I bet more than half of the educational sessions, each education block was centered on some type of EV topic.
Well, and I know from the last 3 years, going through the sessions, I felt that shift where like, okay, there's a whole track on EV, perfect. But then what ended up happening is even if you were in a class that was talking about EV, invariably all the discussion would push you to EV. And every session ended up becoming an EV session just by the discussion, right?
Absolutely.
But it doesn't seem like that's stopping anytime soon. So if you're hoping to go to a show and learn something different, hold your breath a little bit. You'll get something out of Tony's, but I'm sure somebody brought up EVs during the session.
Absolutely.
Right? In fact, shifted.
Yeah, we talked about that. One of the school districts that we've been doing some work with recently, they had committed 100% to EV school buses.
Yeah.
And year 1 went great as scheduled. Year 2 went good as scheduled. Year 3, they were shorted a few. But this year they can't get any. Zero electric school buses are available from their provider. And so now they're going back to diesel school buses just because they have to replace them.
They got no choice.
Yeah. They have to replace them. I mean, it's a state mandate that they're supposed to replace them at 12 years. And you can get 1 or maybe 2-year extensions, but they have to replace them.
Yeah. The good news is as long as you're not in California, right, or say that's signed on to CARB or ACF, if you do diesel, you can get other alternative diesels, right? You can get renewable diesel. You can find other sustainable means of fueling that vehicle, even though it is conventionally fueled. If that's something that, you have somebody that's really pushing for sustainability, green, all that, there are options for that.
Absolutely. One of the things that, Mark Ken that works with us, obviously, he's a big proponent of it. And we do a lot of analysis that show people that just by renewing your fleet and getting newer models in the fleet, even if they're gasoline, even if they're diesel, you're going to have increased fuel efficiency. You're going to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So you are doing something, even if you're not buying EV or hybrid vehicles.
Cool. Well, thanks for going out and hitting the trade show circuit for us.
Absolutely.
It's obviously awesome to have you out there as an ambassador for the company. If I remember right, you're speaking next week as well at GF?
No, not next week. I'm FleetCon in the fall.
That's right.
Sure.
Okay.
But I will not be at GFX this year.
That's right. Mark Facundo and I are speaking. Right. We've got our after session. So if you're going to be at GFX by the time you hear this episode, I'd love to see you guys stop by the booth and stick around for our after session after the event. We'll be talking about fleet success, some of these things with fleet replacement, and then doing a little show and tell of what's new at RTA because it's exciting times. So with that, we'll sign off and until next time.
Great. Thanks.